Part 6. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishita Did. Chapter 51. Because all the lords died. The 100,000 skeleton warriors brought by Chester lost order in an instant, and kept crashing around, and could no longer organize their fighting power. Considering that the territory would also leave after the death of the Lord, Julugo did not pay attention to the idea of those harmless skeletons. Just quietly waited for Fiki to rebound to its original appearance. After a few minutes, Fiki's bones twitched and rebounded again. My lord is really brave and wise. One trick made Chester have no way back. After saying that, Fiki looked at Chester's broken bones with lingering fear. All the cotters in the cemetery laughed at him for being soft-boned. But what's wrong with his soft bones? He is proud of his soft bones. Those hard bones will break when stepped on, and his soft bones have been stepped on so many times, but he has never been in trouble. He can't even leave the war game alive. What's the good of this hard bone? Thinking of this, Fiki continued to turn his head and flatter Julugo. Now that Chester has been eliminated, most of the other cotters are staying in various corners of their birthplace to guard against humans and elves. You meet, oh no, the road for you to summon the Supreme is now unobstructed. Stop flattering and continue to lead the way, Julugo said directly. She had no interest in occupying the entire territory of the undead. It was too tiring and she was too lazy to do it. This time, the fallen empire launched a war of vigilance. It was just to warn the undead what to understand and what not to understand. In front of the fallen empire, the wisdom of other civilizations is not a compliment. Knowing too much is to seek death. Chester. The abnormality on the front line and the changes in the war interface also attracted the attention of the Supreme. First it was Fitch, then Chester, and then the two cotters that Julugo eliminated on the way. The Great Cemetery was equivalent to being directly hit hard. The Supreme couldn't figure it out. If Fitch lost, it would be excusable. How did Chester, a staunch advocate of war, lose? The opponent only had 20 cavalrymen. But now is not the time to think about that. The Supreme looked at the front line. Because of Chester's death, the line of the undead at the junction with the jackals has begun to collapse. In the Stone Age, their bones were not tough. Therefore, the jackals could easily smash the bones of the skeleton warriors with stone tools. To stop this all-out war launched by the jackals, relying on the skeleton warriors alone is far from enough. Fox, what do you think? The Supreme asked a cotter holding a skull behind him. If you don't mind, it's time to use our trump card. Fox bowed his head and said. If the jackals think that their cemetery will pin their hopes on the final strategy, then they are very wrong. In fact, as early as the first week, the undead had already started their layout. Fox slowly extended the skull in his hand to the Supreme. Howling, special item. Effect, this contaminated special item has the ability to bring back the Scourge, but please note that the Scourge does not distinguish between enemies and friends. Note, the Scourge will only reappear after being successfully defeated. The Howling special item was brought by Fox from a higher level battlefield. The rules of a higher level battlefield are more relaxed, so the characteristics of the special item are much better than those of the Stone Age. It can be said that Fox is a fish-frying existence from a higher level battlefield. With the Howling, the undead are unlikely to lose this game. Unless Fox is too unlucky and does not trigger the Scourge event for the entire game. Otherwise, as long as the Scourge event occurs, Fox's advantage can be fully reflected. Therefore, in this game, the wolves in the first week have always been the real hope of the Great Cemetery, not the so-called final strategy. After receiving the instruction of the Supreme, Fox slowly raised the Howling in his hand and squeezed it hard. I only felt a black light covering the battlefield, and the sky darkened instantly. What's going on? The jackals, who were immersed in beating the drowned dog, looked at the scene in confusion. until a giant wolf with dark green hair emerged from the darkness and bit off the throats of one jackal warrior after another. Fox looked at everything in front of him with satisfaction. He had expected this scene. When discussing cooperation with the human race, at the request of Gongxing Jian, he tried to release the howling to revive the natural disaster that destroyed the human race. Although many people died in the human race, it also created two celebrities, Gongxing Jian and Wushuan General. It can be said that if it weren't for Fox's help, except for Gao Jiang, no lord of the human race could get any full server notification. At this time, the helpless screams of the jackals were still coming one after another. Compared with the jackals, the losses suffered by the undead race seemed very minor. Because most of the undead lords failed to kill the giant wolf. When the howling was released, the number of giant wolves attacking the undead was more than 10 times less than that attacking the gnolls. It's a pity. The Supreme shook his head. I originally thought that after cooperating with humans, I could use this strange item to give the elves a surprise. Now, if the gnolls are defeated, the elves might also notice it. As a result, just as the Supreme's voice fell, a deafening roar came from behind the undead. The Supreme stood up suddenly and looked back in disbelief. That voice did not sound like the voice of the Nether Wolf. Its voice was stronger and louder than the Nether Wolf. Boom, boom, boom. Heavy footsteps came. Suddenly, a piece of white bones was blown away. Under the sweep of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, dozens of skeleton warriors were blown away and scattered all over the ground. Is this the 20 cavalry that has been circulating in the forum? The Supreme really wanted to pry open the skull of the undead lord who released this news to see if even his bone marrow had dried up. Why didn't anyone tell him that it was 20 dragon knights for so long? Or did the dry brain cells of the undead lords make them unable to handle such a complex language problem? The envoy of the fallen empire has come with the might of heaven, why don't you hurry up and welcome him? Fitch's arrogant voice came from behind the Tyrannosaurus Rex, causing some anger to surge on the skeleton of the Supreme's face. He didn't know what greeting meant. But it shouldn't be a very respectful word to him. What a coward, he has grown in courage after not seeing him for a few days. Determined to slowly cook Fitch into bone soup, the Supreme looked at Julugo on the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Take your people and surrender, Julugo said straight to the point. Why? The Supreme pointed to the position behind him. Just wait a few more hours, and those unprepared jackals will be slaughtered by the nether giant wolf. After eliminating this batch of main combat forces, we can kill into the territory of the jackals and turn it into a land of death. So what does it have to do with me whether they live or die? Julugo looked at the Supreme in confusion. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, me she did. Chapter 52. You, me, them. The Supreme pointed at Julugo, and then at the wolf-man camp that was wailing in the distance. Aren't you in the same group? This time, there was no need to wait for Julugo's answer. Fiki stood up and said quickly, a mere weak jackal is worthy of being this lord's ally. I don't know if it was because of the Tyrannosaurus Rex standing next to him, but Fitch felt that this was the strongest thing he had said since this war game. But it is obvious that Fitch's words have no credibility in front of the Supreme. The Supreme is still a little suspicious. The jackals and the fallen empire declared war on the undead at the same time. Although the reasons for the war between the two are different, there are not so many coincidences in the world. The 20 Tyrannosaurus Rex knights indeed exceeded the Supreme's expectations. The Supreme also has no doubt that he is at risk of falling today. But now Julugo's attention is on himself, and Fox has left safely. Therefore, we can test whether they really don't care about those jackals. During the few seconds when the Supreme was silent, Julugo was obviously a little impatient. Seeing Julugo's fingers tapping on the reins, Fiki seemed to realize something and hurriedly ran towards the rear. Have you thought about it? To surrender, or not to surrender? Faced with Julugo's problem, Supreme suddenly assumed a stance of confronting the enemy, and the surrounding skeleton warriors also gathered around him in droves. On this front line, thousands of undead lords and millions of skeleton warriors gathered. It must be impossible to surrender. Now that their skeletons and bodies are so fragile, if technology is permanently blocked to 60%, it won't be at anyone's disposal. What's more, the Supreme One also needs to observe Julugo's attitude. As long as Julugo showed a little care, both sides would have room for negotiation. Come on, Lord Julugo. Fitch had already run very far behind at this moment. After confirming that no matter how hard he hit him, he couldn't hit him, he cheered for Julugo without hesitation. At the same time, he glanced at the Supreme hesitantly. Come on, Lord Supreme. The Supreme glared back, almost making Fitch laugh angrily. He's such a weakling, he can't offend even if he shouts come on, right? Really, isn't it good to live honestly? Julugo looked at the Supreme and shook her head helplessly. She saw the Supreme's hesitation and resistance. In fact, it's not just the Supreme. The fallen empire has encountered this kind of thing countless times in its tens of thousands of years of history. But those new civilizations never learn to be humble. Humph, strictly speaking, we are dead animals in your mouth. The Supreme being choked back, and then retreated backwards. The moment the Supreme retreated, a tide of skeleton warriors swarmed up and surrounded the Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is a common trick used by the undead. They are always good at using the weakest combat power to consume the opponent's physical strength and vitality. A high-end combat power like the Supreme will often appear in person only when the defeat has been decided or the victory is determined. However, Julugo would not give him a chance to escape from the battlefield. The Tyrannosaurus Rex beneath him roared and charged directly towards the Supreme. Along the way, countless broken bones rose into the sky. Advance and retreat in a controlled manner, this general will not be trapped in a bitter battle, and this general cannot be blocked from action. These skeleton warriors can't stop the Tyrannosaurus Rex at all. The Tyrannosaurus Rex under Julugo almost effortlessly rushed to the Supreme One and pushed it with his forehead. Boom! There was a heavy crash. The Supreme figure fell backwards, but quickly stood up again. Julugo narrowed her eyes. In the territory of the undead, this was the first time she saw a skeleton able to hold back the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Of course, except for the weakling Fitch. At a glance, after being hit by the Tyrannosaurus Rex, there were no obvious cracks in the bones of the Supreme, and it seemed that the injury was not serious. Has it developed to this extent in just 1 month? Julugo's vigilance suddenly rose. The Tyrannosaurus Rex in the Wall of Size have been cultivated for many years, and the best among the best are the best. Their combat power is much stronger than ordinary dinosaur species in the wild. Now facing the Supreme, Tyrannosaurus Rex actually encountered resistance. They cannot be allowed to develop any further. Their technology tree must be locked forever in the present. In fact, after being hit by a Tyrannosaurus Rex forcefully, the Supreme Being was not as comfortable as it appeared on the surface. He could feel some cracks appearing inside his bones. No wonder ordinary skeleton warriors can't even stop the opponent's progress. The Supreme One knows his own strength best. In the Stone Age, he was a naked war weapon. Even his war weapon is almost unstoppable. What can an ordinary skeleton warrior do? However, the time is almost up. The Supreme looked towards the battlefield on the other side of the jackal. As a guy who came down from a high-level battlefield to fry fish, Fox had more than one strange item on his body. For example, the strange item used at the moment can greatly increase the intensity of the whale. Infection of the deceased, wonderful object. Effect: life forms killed by natural disasters will be resurrected as independent individuals of the undead. A strange green plague filled the battlefield on the jackal side. Where the plague passed, all life turned into death. From this moment on, every time the nether wolf killed a gnoll, A new skeleton would appear in the world by peeling off the flesh and blood of the gnoll. The gnoll's front collapsed. Saha, Saha, what should we do now? Several elite lords among the gnolls hurriedly wanted to get Saha's opinion. However, they soon discovered with anger that as the initiator of this all-out war, Saha disappeared. I said that the gnolls had no intention of winning. When Saha's figure appeared again, he had returned to the place where he met Gao Qiang at that time. This is the heartland of the gnolls. Even if all the gnolls on the front line were slaughtered, the undead tribe would not be able to attack here before the end of the game. At the same time, Saha opened his panel. In the Lord Path, Zongheng has been promoted to the 3rd level. The blood of countless jackals fed him, and he would be the only winner of the jackals in this war game. And what Saha just used was the ability he gained when the vertical and horizontal path was upgraded to the 2nd level. Escape from the invisible, limited to once per game, you can instantly go to any place you have been to. Saha looked at the direction where Gao Qiang left and murmured, I just don't know if he is satisfied with the gift I gave. He also intended to use the jackals to consume the undead strange objects. But he didn't expect that the undead strange objects were so vicious that they could kill the fully prepared jackals. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 53. At the battle point between the gnolls and the undead, the confrontation between the Supreme and Julugo fell into silence. Because the Supreme discovered a problem. The front-line troops of the gnolls have died at this moment. And Julugo still looked like she didn't care. She really didn't care about the lives of those gnolls. After understanding this, the Supreme slowly let the surrounding skeleton warriors put down their spears. This was his attitude, and it was also because these skeleton warriors did not pose any threat to Julugo. Can I ask a question first? The Supreme stared at Julugo's eyes with his empty eye sockets. If we surrender to you, does it mean that we also need to surrender to the gnolls? I don't care, Julugo said without hesitation. Your grievances have nothing to do with me. Hearing this, the Supreme seemed relieved. Although surrendering means that their technology will be blocked forever, staying at 60% in this game and unable to make any progress. But this also means that they can get rid of the threat of these 20 Tyrannosaurus Knights. The march of the Tyrannosaurus Rex was witnessed by all the undead lords present. The mere skeleton warriors could not stop them at all. As long as the fallen empire withdraws from this war, they, the undead, abandon their defense measures against the humans and elves. Gather all the troops together. Even if they lose this war game, they can at least win this all-out war with the jackals. After thinking this through, the Supreme issued a notice in the Forum of the Undead. We lost the war against the fallen empire. But our anger against the living will ignite every inch of the jackal's land. After the announcement was released, the Supreme took the lead in announcing the surrender to the fallen empire. Then came the cotters of the Great Cemetery who followed the Supreme, as well as the subordinates of the cotters. Seeing the surrender of the entire Great Cemetery, the remaining undead lords naturally did not resist and announced the defeat of the war against the fallen empire. Seeing this scene, Fiki, who was hiding in the safe area, naturally ran away without hesitation, fearing that the Supreme would come back to trouble him. At the same time, Gao Qiang, who was sitting in the wall of size and drinking iced juice, saw that the number of enemy participants in the war interface continued to decrease, until it was completely zero. The fallen empire has achieved the goal of total war against the undead, hereby notified. In this game, the undead have obtained a permanent buff, technology blockade, and the technology tree cannot break through 60% of the upper limit. Finally, there is another notification to congratulate Gao Qiang. Congratulations on completing the total war against the undead. As a reward, after this game, you can choose to take away an item in this game. You are calculating your contribution in this total war. Your contribution is 100%, so the item level you can choose is Miracle and below. After the notification, in the birthplace of the elves, an elf lord suddenly stopped the actions of his subjects. In the hands of that subject, there was a fine bow that was about to be completed. Lord, why? The lord seemed puzzled. Once the fine bow in his hand is completed and this technology is activated, the combat effectiveness of their territory will be greatly improved. With this fine bow, they can even easily hunt small dragons. The elven lord shook his head and did not intend to explain. After making this fine bow, he was not sure whether he would break through the technology tree to 60% of the upper limit of this game. The fate of the undead has given him a good warning. For the war game, he was cautious and cautious. Without the full confidence of fighting against the fallen empire, he would never touch the reverse scale of that unknown force. Besides, his confidence is coming soon. The elven lord picked up the polished stone knife in his hand and led the lord to the root of an ancient tree. At the root of the ancient tree, there was a huge cave that was dug out. Entering the cave, a foul smell came to the face. Jing Yi. A weak but gnashing voice came from the front of the elf lord. It was a bound elf girl. Her body was covered with scratches, and the coagulated blood mixed with mud stuck to her thin body. Looking around the cave, it was full of elves who were tortured to death. You will be punished. Jing Yi did not respond, but walked forward quietly and raised the girl's chin. The life of the elves comes from the ancient tree of life. And the girl at the moment, and Jing Yi came from the same plane belonging to the elves. Strictly speaking, the girl is Jing Yi's sister. So he took advantage of the other party's trust, tricked the other party and all his subjects here, and tortured them to death. Looking at the anger in the girl's eyes, Jing Yi did not hesitate to cut the other party's artery with a stone knife and drain the last trace of blood from the girl. Final strategic progress Add 1. Do you open the Lord path, traitor? No. This was the umpteenth time Jing Yi had rejected this approach. The reason why Jing Yi did this was naturally the final strategy brought about by the evil star buff. Forest power, revive a giant tree over 50 meters tall into a war ancient tree. When the war ancient tree is present, it will occasionally generate split bodies to fight together. Introduction: the elves have been guarding the forest for a long time, therefore, when the elves are in desperate situations, the forests they guard will show them their true power. The conditions for achieving this final strategy are not harsh, and can even be said to be very simple. Because this final strategy does not require any miracles or any materials. It only requires 3,000 angry elf corpses. That's right, full of anger. Only the corpses of elves who died in anger can make the war ancient tree come. Except for anger, the rest of the emotions are worthless. Whether it is bravery in the fight against foreign enemies or the heroic sacrifice of voluntary sacrifice, it cannot touch the war ancient tree in the slightest. All it needs is anger. And for those elves who trust Jing Yi, is there anything more infuriating than his betrayal? Progress, 2963/3000. Looking at the progress bar that was approaching the critical point, Jing Yi showed a grim expression. It's almost there. Every day, he would kill several lords and hundreds of their subjects here. He only needed to trick one more lord to come here, and his caution for this month would not be in vain. The elves will win this war game. As for those dead lords, the ancient tree of life can produce more at any time. What the mother really needs is more land for her to take root. Jing Yi looked at the pit behind him with a crazy look on his face. Facing the bodies of his companions who died tragically, he seemed to see the kind face of the mother. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 54. Jing Yi, you must die a happy death. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. Jing Yi slowly put down the stone knife dripping with blood in his hand. A smile appeared on Jingyi's lips. The 1,000-year-old oak tree in front of him finally slowly opened its angry eyes. That is, far beyond the Stone Age, coming from mysterious power. The elves have reached the final strategy, the power of the forest. The moment Gao Qiang received the notification from all servers, Zhuozhu directly opened the door and entered the Lord's Hall. At this moment, Zhuozhu put on a witch robe and held a bone staff made of unknown animal bones in his hand. Facing Gao Qiang, her expression was unexpectedly serious. I suddenly felt an evil aura that had exceeded the upper limit of this world and was rising from the forest thousands of miles away. Seeing Grandma Zhuozhu acting like this, Gao Qiang couldn't help but put away his original lazy look. As soon as the elves reached the final strategy, Zhuozhu had already sensed it and claimed to feel the evil aura that had exceeded the upper limit of the world. It's hard not to be reminded of that final strategy. The Jackal's ultimate strategy has been seen by Zhao Qiang. Whether it is a giant chariot or a sacrificial altar, it is not like what could be possessed in the Stone Age. This forest power of the elves must be at least equal to it. What's more, Gao Qiang's heart condensed. The elves had reached the final strategy and had taken the lead. The real meat grinder battlefield of the Stone Age is probably about to begin. Just when Gao Qiang was quietly waiting for Zhuozhu's next words, Shasha suddenly opened the door and walked in, looking at the solemn atmosphere in the hall with a puzzled look. The Lord and Mother-in-law are here. The bonfire feast is about to begin. Are you still staying in the house? After saying that, without waiting for the two to answer, Shasha walked up with a smile, took their hands, and pulled them out of the house. Let's go, let's go. It's the best thing in the world to eat. If you have any unhappy things, just don't think about it. As he was being pulled away, Zhuozhu glanced out the window. At the same time, he leaned into Gao Qiang's ear and whispered, Lord, we may have to pick up Zhuoluo and the other children. You mean, Zhuoluo and the others are in danger? Gao Qiang thought of a possibility. The final strategy achieved by the elves can threaten the Tyrannosaurus Rex knights outside. This is not impossible. Because according to Gao Qiang's prediction, if the jackals are allowed to achieve their final strategy, their giant tanks may be enough to bulldoze their own flood control walls. Zhuozhu nodded, not hiding his solemnity about this matter at all. At the same time, she also revealed her concerns about the current situation of the territory. The evil aura that has exceeded the upper limit has arrived in this world, and within the entire wall of size, she is the only one who is aware of it. No one has broken the peace of the wall of size for tens of thousands of years. The arrogance of the nobles is written in their bones, and they will not take anything seriously until they experience it for themselves. Someone must break everyone's dreams before the evil breath arrives, otherwise even the fallen empire will pay the price for its arrogance. But, who can do it? What? Gongxing Jian suddenly stood up from his seat. He also saw the server-wide notification. Just now he was worried about Gao Qiang's ridiculous contribution to the war, but now the elves have given him another great gift. How could it be that the elves were the first to complete the final strategy? Gongxing Jian looked at the final strategic progress that was about to be completed and was puzzled. Today is the last day of this week, and the final strategy of the human race is finally being prepared. If it weren't for himself and Gao Qiang, the final strategic progress of the human race would never have progressed so fast. Speaking of which, Gongxing Jian had to thank Gao Qiang. Because Gao Qiang contributed all the food and rare items needed, the other lords no longer had to contribute these two items. The remaining food is enough to raise the overall development of the human race to a higher level. More territorial citizens represent more labor force, and more resources can be collected in the same time. Now, only the option of filling up the stone is enough for the human race to complete the final strategy. But it's coming soon. Now that Gongxing's sword has recruited a large number of skeletons to mine day and night, the demand for stone will definitely be met tonight. Look at the radiant image of the power of the stars. Gong Xingjian couldn't help but relax a lot. Many people will die tonight. Whether it's the elves or the powerful ones, they're just stepping stones for him. The human race will win, and he will be the final number one of the human race. Then, it's time to tell others to evacuate. Messages were spread out by the Gongxing sword and reached every lord who joined the Shangji alliance. The human race has reached the final strategy, the power of the stars. Shortly after the final strategic deployment of the human race was completed, it was 12 o'clock at midnight. But this week's rules have ended. The number of lost lords this week is 5,228. I hope you will continue your efforts. This time the rules are over and there are no brand new rules coming soon. Instead, a large carousel unfolded in front of some of the lords of the human race and the elves. Punishment time. At this time, Gao Qiang heard a dragon roar, and in the night, groups of pterosaurs flew out of the mountains and forests, flying towards the birthplace of the humans and elves. Only when they are about to pass the wall of size will the pterosaurs slightly deviate from their flight path and take a detour from a farther sky. It seems that some lords did not complete the rules of this week very well, and chose to continue to be invisible and fish in troubled waters. Now, they will pay the price for their choices. Ding! Hearing the sound in his ear, Gao Qiang suddenly realized that he was also in the punishment option. Who really picked him? Human Lord Wushuan General, declares war on Human Lord Gao Qiang. War reason, none. Not only Gao Qiang was stunned. Even Su Yukai, who was opening the chat interface, was stunned. Because he was surrounded by human lords. He didn't have anyone he trusted, and he didn't want to hurt those weak lords, so he didn't choose to declare war on anyone. Of course, no one dared to declare war on him. Therefore, Su Yukai did not complete the rules of this week's army confrontation as expected. As for Gao Qiang, it was a complete accident. But why is his enemy Gao Qiang? Looking at the name of the enemy displayed in the war interface. At this moment, Su Yukai finally thought of a guess that he had thought about several times but didn't dare to believe. A message was sent directly from the chat window. Brother Qiang, did you receive my declaration of war? Yes. Also, are you the Gao Qiang who ranked first on the list? Yes. Gao Qiang had no hidden intentions. In fact, he thought that when he sent the architectural drawings to Su Yukai and arranged for the Ji family to be under Su Yukai's command, his good brother should have guessed it. The result is now. His good brother seems to be a little late to realize it. It's just on the other side of the chat box. Seeing Gao Qiang's reply, Su Yukai's face has changed. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 55. Oops. Because of Gao Qiang's admission, he figured out a lot of things in an instant. As the deputy leader of the Shangji alliance, Gongxing Jian still revealed some things to him. This includes some information about the power of the stars. And just now he was about to open the chat window because he wanted to tell Gao Qiang about this. At that time, he was not in a hurry because he didn't know that Gao Qiang was the one that Gongxing Jian wanted to deal with, and he was located in the land of 4 battles. Now that he knew that Gao Qiang was the one at the top of the rankings, Su Yukai finally realized that Gao Qiang was in danger at this moment. After casually clicking surrender in the middle of the war interface, Su Yukai sent a chat message to Gao Qiang. Run away quickly and find a cave to hide in. Su Yukai knew that his sudden statement would only make people feel confused. Therefore, an introduction to the final strategy of the human race, the power of the stars, is attached in the follow-up. Power of the stars, begging for the power of the stars to come to the world after activation. The meteorite rain will fall non-stop within the next 24 hours, hitting the territories of the 4 tribes indiscriminately. Note, the border between different races will bear multiple chances of being hit, up to 4 times the higher the threat, the chance of being hit by meteorite rain will also be greatly increased. Meteorite rain? Gao Qiang never expected that the final strategy drawn by the human race in the Stone Age would actually be related to meteorites. With all the power of the stars, are you Lu Xiu, Emperor Guanggu of the Han Dynasty? No, choosing this final strategy, what on earth does that guy from Kosei Sword want to do? Gao Qiang just glanced at the human forum in a very short time. In the human forum, most lords are still discussing what the rules will be next week, and some are worried about the upcoming punishment. No one even talked about the fact that meteorites would rain down in the next 24 hours. At this time, this week's rules also appear. Since the elves have taken the lead in launching the final strategy and the number of dead lords in this round exceeds 30%, starting from this week, the war victory conditions will be unlocked. War victory, when the number of remaining lords in this game is less than 40% of the total, the force with the most remaining lords will win the game. Conditions for victory in the war. Gao Qiang knows this. In war games, there are many different victory conditions, but they are not informed to players at the beginning of the game. Under normal circumstances, depending on the development of each race in the game, there will be different ways to win, such as domination victory and religious victory. It's just that war victory is the most common way to win a war game. Gao Qiang's idea before entering the war game was to become one of the remaining 40% of lords. But at this moment, I thought of the situation that Su Yukai specially informed me of. Gao Qiang couldn't help but guess that Gongxing Jian didn't inform the other human lords about the power of the stars because he was preparing to abandon them as abandoned children. Nowadays, the Knoll lords and the undead lords are both losing. The number of lords has dropped sharply, and the population of elven lords is not large. As long as the human race dies a few more lords, it will soon enter the final settlement stage. Of course, the most important thing is yourself. Gao Qiang has not forgotten that he is in a place of 4 battles, and the chance of being attacked by meteorites is 4 times that of ordinary lords. At the same time, he has the highest threat level in the world and is the easiest target for meteorites. In other words, when a meteorite arrives, unless you are lucky enough, you will almost certainly become a target. Even Gongxing Sword's calculations were very good. Until the moment when the meteorite was about to arrive, he only announced the news about the power of the stars within the Shangji alliance. Now even if Su Yukai told himself, with his own footsteps, he would not be able to hide in any cave. Lord, look at the stars in the sky. Sasha pulled Gao Qiang's sleeves with her greasy hands, stretched out her grilled ribs and pointed toward the sky. The stars are extremely bright today. Gao Qiang raised his head, stared at the increasingly larger light spot, and his pupils shrank. Meteorite. And there's more than one. Several meteorites fell towards the wall of size at the same time, and judging from this posture, they were directed at Gao Qiang. No wonder Su Yukai reminded him to look for a cave. If a meteorite really hits, it will be useless to hide anywhere unless there is a thick enough protective layer. But it can reduce losses as much as possible. Thinking of this, Gao Qiang shouted to everyone around him, "Hurry up and spread out." There was a pause of laughter near Stonehenge, and then everyone saw the location pointed by Gao Qiang's finger. Several shooting stars became brighter and brighter in everyone's eyes. "Lord, please take that silly girl Shasha out of here first." Zhuzu stood up and stared at the meteorites in the sky without any panic in his eyes. Zhuzu was one of the few people who didn't eat much during tonight's bonfire feast. She has always been worried, because the divination has gradually been biased in an unfavorable direction. The evil aura is gradually getting stronger. It is precisely because Zhuzu is also a member of the ancient nobles that she understands the arrogance and decadence in the hearts of the nobles. And now the raging fire coming from the sky will become the best opportunity to burn out everyone's decadence. Everyone evacuated the place, and even Shasha was pulled aside by Gao Qiang. At this moment, Gao Qiang looked at Zhuzu who was still in front of Stonehenge. Xiuzu waved the bone stick in his hand without leaving any trace. In a place that no one could detect, the path of a meteorite in the sky changed slightly. It was this change that changed the direction of the meteorite's impact to the location of Stonehenge. Huh. At this time, Sasha looked at the increasingly bright fire in the sky and the location where the fire was about to arrive, and finally realized that something was wrong. Wait, there is. Before Sasha finished speaking, there was a loud bang, and endless heat waves spread all around. The meteorite had completely smashed into the center of Stonehenge. Pa! The grilled ribs in Sasha's hand fell to the ground, and she looked at the direction of Stonehenge with a dull look. Not only Sasha, almost all the ancient nobles who were just chatting and laughing showed the same dull expression. Even another meteorite smashing down the flood control wall did not change their expressions at all. Your miracle building, ancient Stonehenge, has been destroyed. All bonuses of ancient Stonehenge will be invalid. You have witnessed the disappearance of a miracle. Do you want to enter the Lord's path, miracle? Yes. Finally seeing this path, Gao Qiang chose to enter without hesitation. At this moment, the whole world seemed to be stagnant. The flames that shot up into the sky stopped in place, and the actions of everyone in the territory were also stuck. The only change was a dazzling white light that lit up at the site where the ancient Stonehenge was completely turned into ashes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 56. Tell me your wish. An ethereal voice came from the Stonehenge. Who? Gao Qiang asked subconsciously. But the voice did not answer Gao Qiang's question, but just continued to repeat, tell me your wish. Gao Qiang paused, as if he realized something. Opening his personal attributes, he found that he had not gained any ability after entering the first level miracle path. At this time, the reminder of the war game sounded. Witnessing the demise of miracles is a miracle in itself. You have successfully entered the path that belongs only to miracles. No one knows whether you can reach the top, but now, make any wish, miracles will satisfy your dreams. Looking at the reminder of the war game, Gao Qiang did not speak for a while. Make any wish? It is said that the strength of each path is equal. Can the miracle path really be so powerful? Another 999 wishes, Gao Qiang asked tentatively. But the light in the center of the Stonehenge seemed to be stuck for a moment, and then repeated, tell me your wish. Tisk. Knowing that the other party could not really fulfill all wishes, Gao Qiang curled his lips. In this case, then be as greedy as possible. I hope that I can always win the war game. The light was stuck for a moment, as if it understood what Gao Qiang said. Then, a medal with an ancient stone circle appeared in front of Gao Qiang out of thin air and was imprinted in Gao Qiang's personal panel. Your wish has been fulfilled. Can it really be done? Gao Qiang opened his personal panel suspiciously and looked at his Lord path. Miracle, first level. This time, there is a new ability below the path. Estimation, 36 strategies, the 37th strategy, when facing any enemy, you always estimate that you can win. Effect, when you survive on the game field, all lords in this game can directly see the gap between any lord and their own military, economic, and technological levels. Gao Qiang had several question marks on his head. The wish he made was to hope that he could always win the war game, right? Or did this miracle path also include the 3 words I hope in my wish? Gao Qiang's mouth twitched, it's not impossible. At this time, as Gao Qiang completely entered the miracle path, the light of the Stonehenge disappeared, and everything around Gao Qiang resumed its dynamic state. Gao Qiang only heard a light sound in his ear. Sasha had already knelt on the ground, looking at the direction of the Stonehenge and shedding 2 lines of clear tears. If you listen closely, you can still hear a few unclear words from Sasha's mouth. My spices, my smoothie, my... At this moment, the negative effects of the meteorite are still continuing. Because of the contact with the ice buried under the Stonehenge, countless hot water vapors are spreading around, and at the same time, it is filled with some flying broken stones. At this time, a stone hit Sasha's head, and a trace of blood instantly flowed from her smooth forehead, mixing with the tears in Sasha's eyes. At this moment, the world in Sasha's eyes has been stained with blood. Gao Qiang reached out his hand with some distress and helped Sasha. Suddenly, Sasha held Gao Qiang back. Lord. Looking at Sasha, who suddenly recovered from her dull eyes to calmness, Gao Qiang was obviously stunned. Because at this moment, Sasha's expression was very wrong. The smile and laziness on her face in the past were no longer seen. Although Sasha also proposed to demolish Stonehenge, everyone knew that it was just a joke. Now that Stonehenge has really collapsed, it is a big blow to Sasha. Sasha doesn't know what she did wrong to make them treat Sasha like this. But Sasha slowly looked at the completely destroyed flood control wall in the distance. Not only Sasha, Gao Qiang made a keen discovery. Almost all the ancient nobles, even those who were not around Stonehenge, walked to the open space one after another, with an unspeakable emotion in their eyes. They simply don't understand what kind of crime they have committed. Now, let's be frank. Since the ancient Stonehenge has been destroyed, you will get buff, Dragon Awakening. Your territory type has been changed to Awakening Empire. The gears of fate move forward, the long-sleeping dragon slowly opens its eyes, and the dormant tiger bares its fangs to the world. The new civilization has long lost its respect for the old court. The people under your command have sharpened their blades and looked towards the familiar yet strange world. Now, it's time to use fear to let us re-enter their memories. Effect 6 has been removed, and you have obtained the Awakening feature. Awakening Empire. Effect 1, you will unlock all the recruitment rights of the arms and building blueprints that belong exclusively to the Awakening Empire. Effect 2, you don't need to spend any resources to recruit soldiers. When you use people to recruit soldiers, there is no training time. Effect 3, the number of soldiers you recruit is not limited by the total number of people. Gao Qiang knew that these were not the most important. The most important thing is that after the territory was corrected to the Awakening Empire, he could finally build buildings and recruit soldiers like a normal player. He couldn't wait to open the recruitment interface. A large number of military options came into Gao Qiang's eyes. Among them, Gao Qiang found that not every military type of civilization can be recruited in the Awakening Empire. But some of the unique military types of the Awakening Empire can only be described as abnormal. Gilo swallowed his saliva, and Gao Qiang simply set several conditions in the large number of military training options. Flame resistance, sorted by combat effectiveness. Many military options disappeared in an instant. Among the remaining options, Gao Qiang directly looked at the military type with the strongest combat effectiveness. Obsidian Champion Infantry Knight. Introduction: Obsidian is also a stone. The unique casting technology allows us to cast obsidian into armor, and only 1 in 10,000 warriors can be crowned with the title of champion. Training requirements: Ancient Noble X1. Features: Cutting Damage Immunity, Piercing Damage Immunity, Fire Damage Immunity, Lightning Damage Immunity. Excited heart, trembling hands. Gao Qiang has never heard of any soldier that can have so many damage immunities at the same time. Moreover, the strength of the Obsidian Champion Infantry Knight is far more than that. At the end of a large number of damage immunities, this Infantry Knight has a special feature. Pyrotechnic Armor. These warriors are good at using flames as their own barrier, burning every enemy who dares to approach them. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 57. Without hesitation, Gao Qiang maxed out the training quota. After exiting the training interface, Gao Qiang saw all the ancient nobles walking towards their residences, including Shasha beside him. There was no training cost and no training time. When everyone gathered again, they had all changed into a set of dark and heavy obsidian armor. The weight of the armor could even make a mud pit on the ground when walking. At the same time, Gao Qiang noticed one thing. Although it was said in the introduction that only 1 in 10,000 warriors could be given the title of champion for the Obsidian Champion Infantry Knight. But all the infantry knights converted from nobles present were champions. Gao Qiang subconsciously thought of a sentence. Why are nobles expensive? Is it because they are born luxurious? No, it is because the blades in their hands are sharp enough and they are strong enough. But everything brought by the awakening empire is far more than that. Gao Qiang looked to the other side. The waiters were not trained to become obsidian champion infantry knights like the nobles. Because in the troop tree, Gao Qiang also saw some outrageous things. Their combat power may not be so terrifying, but if they were placed in the Stone Age, it would be a complete dimensionality reduction attack. Kerosene thrower. Introduction. These agile jar throwers wear special cloaks that are immune to fire, and are good at bringing flames to every corner they can see. Training requirements, Ancient Waiter X1. Features, Fire Damage Immunity, Advanced Melee Proficiency, Blazing Fire. Like the Infantry Knight, this is also a troop that uses kerosene to attack. Gao Qiang hesitated for a moment and trained half of the waiters in the territory as kerosene throwers. As for why not all of them were trained, it was naturally in the previous training menu that Gao Qiang saw that waiters could be trained into many flexible troop types. For example, field builders who can build defensive buildings and engineering equipment anywhere, dragon trainers who are proficient in taming. As waiters wearing cloaks, holding pottery jars, or holding hammers and tools walk to the side of the infantry knights. Unconsciously, Gao Qiang has trained all the people in the territory into the top soldiers of this era. Gao Qiang even felt that these soldiers in the Stone Age were like questions beyond the scope of the exam paper, which made people feel helpless. At the same time, Gao Qiang's training interface also changed. Although there are no more people in the territory, Gao Qiang's training of all the soldiers is still bright. He can still continue to train soldiers. Gao Qiang thought of the content of Effect 3, and with the idea of trying, he pulled the soldiers to the upper limit of the number. 10,000 people. The training began without charging any resources from Gao Qiang, and after 7 days, these new warriors will be trained. Even though Gao Qiang no longer has any extra people in his hands. Lord. At this time, a figure wearing heavy obsidian armor walked in front of Gao Qiang with heavy steps. Only from the voice could Gao Qiang realize that the person standing in front of him was Shasha, who liked to eat, drink, play and come up with bad ideas every day. A heavy giant sword was inserted into the ground in front of her by Shasha, and she knelt on one knee. Lord, we have more than 13,000 soldiers available for combat, waiting for your dispatch. At the same time, almost all the infantry knights made the same move. More than 13,000 people. Gao Qiang looked at the soldiers available in front of him. The number of these warriors has exceeded 6 times the number of all the subjects of the strongest lord in the Stone Age in the history of the human race. Who would have thought that an hour ago, he only had 30 Tyrannosaurus Rex knights and 500 longbowmen available? Before you issue an order, can we say a few words first? Hayukin suddenly asked Gao Qiang. At this moment, Hayukin, the material officer profession, has completely gotten rid of the word degenerate. She can perfectly dispatch the material volume of 100,000 people. She is no longer the same as before. Gao Qiang nodded. Then Hayukin looked at the warriors in front of her and shouted loudly. We have been silent for too long, so long that the world no longer has any memory of us. While Hayukin was speaking, Lei Heshuo also came over with the 10 Tyrannosaurus knights who stayed behind. So long that those new civilizations dared to trample on our majesty, so long that other civilizations no longer take us seriously, Lei Heshuo added. Grandma Zuzu also turned her eyes to the warriors. Our ancestors used their afterglow to protect us for 10,000 years. They let their descendants be immune to all disasters and enjoy wealth and prosperity. Now, the afterglow of our ancestors has gradually failed to deter the villains, but they have long passed down their power and wisdom. It's time for us to protect our descendants. The scene was silent, and everyone looked at Sasha's position. Sasha's originally solemn expression almost broke. Fortunately, because of the heavy obsidian armor, Sasha's embarrassed expression was not revealed. Look, why are you all looking at me? Why do other people think that I have prepared a speech as well? Sasha kept trying to make eye contact with Gao Qiang to let Gao Qiang give orders quickly, but all of them were blocked by the obsidian helmet. At this moment, Gao Qiang could feel Sasha's embarrassment through the armor. The discomfort caused by Sasha's personality change just now also disappeared instantly. Gao Qiang casually patted Sasha's armor and whispered, "Just say a few words according to your ideas, everyone is watching." "Well, then all right." Sasha stood up from the ground and picked up the giant sword in front of her. After brewing for a long time, she shouted loudly. "Today, we were eating barbecue and singing songs, and suddenly we were blown up by bastards who came out of nowhere. They burned the barbecue we didn't have time to eat, ignited the spices we worked hard to prepare, and destroyed the cellar where we stored ice cubes." Accusing the other party's crimes, Sasha had already cried out in grievance. At the same time, some of the warriors present held their swords a little tighter. Seeing that Sasha was crying harder and harder, Gao Qiang hurried forward and continued to say, "Can we tolerate this kind of thing?" "No," a hand holding a kerosene can was raised. "Then what should we do?" Gao Qiang continued to shout. "Burn them to death." "Yes, burn them to death. Burn them to death." As the shouts of "burn them to death" became louder and louder, Gao Qiang quietly stood back to his original position. In fact, it doesn't have to be so extreme. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 58. Dragon Awakening buff temporarily changes to Dragon Fury because of your speech. What Gao Qiang didn't expect was that a small speech could actually lead to a reminder from the war game. Dragon Fury buff, your war weariness will never increase, and the combat effectiveness of all warriors in your territory will increase by 10%. Compared to Dragon Awakening, Dragon Fury adds an extra part of combat effectiveness, but there is no disadvantage at all. Gao Qiang looked at the many warriors in front of him. When their pride was torn off, when their peaceful life became a dream, their anger almost ignited the whole world. Then go and end this war. Gao Qiang already knew what he should do at this moment. Reaching out his hand, he grasped the giant sword that Sasha was holding. Gao Qiang shouted loudly, "From now on, we will declare war on the world." At the same time, all the lords who were still alive in the war game received a server-wide notice from the war game. The Wall of Size has awakened from its 10,000-year slumber and is once again ruling the continent that was once shrouded in its shadow. Now, giants have entered the children's paradise. The Awakening Empire declares war on all lords, war reason, dragon's wrath. Alert, this is a war with no hope of victory, it is recommended to surrender immediately to minimize losses. Just when most lords were still at a loss, a new server-wide notice appeared again, and it was from the tone of the Awakening Empire. "We will clean up this world again, surrender, or die." The war game gave each lord two options, which are unique options that will be triggered when the Awakening Empire declares war. Option 1, we will not be enemies with the Awakening Empire. After selecting this option, you will automatically surrender to the Awakening Empire and voluntarily become a vassal of the Awakening Empire. At the same time, unless the Awakening Empire perishes, you will not be the winner of this game. After seeing the annotation of option 1, even with the warning of the war game, many lords fell into hesitation. There must be a winner among the 4 tribes. If they bow to the awakening empire that appeared out of nowhere at this moment, they are doomed to end up as losers. Therefore, many people turned their attention to option 2. Option 2, just stupid old antiques, sweep them into the garbage dump of history. All lords who choose this option will be forced to join the war against the awakening empire. At this time, Gao Qiang's miracle talent showed its effect. In front of the other lords, for some reason, a special function appeared to check the gap between themselves and others. Many lords subconsciously checked the gap between their own strength and Gao Qiang. In terms of military, the other party is like a god compared to us. In terms of economy, the other party is like a god compared to us. In terms of technology, the other party is like a god compared to us. 3 ways like gods are nakedly placed in front of all lords. The jackals and undead lords who were fighting each other did not hesitate at all, and directly chose not to be enemies with the awakening empire, and continued to fight between the 2 sides. But except for the undead and the jackals, most of the lords still held on to the fluke. I choose option 2. One by one, the lords of the human race or the elf race finally chose option 2. Because they knew that they were not fighting alone. All the lords who chose the second option would, to a large extent, become grasshoppers on the same front. What if most of the lords were combined to defeat an existence that one lord could not defeat? They might not be defeated. Therefore, hostile targets appeared one after another in Gao Qiang's war panel. Almost all the elites of the human race and the elves chose to join this war. However, what Gao Qiang did not expect was the friend message sent by Suyukai. Do you need help? I will bring the Ji family to help you. After knowing who Gao Qiang was, Suyukai also understood a lot of things. For example, if he wants to help Gao Qiang now. Most of the elders in the Shangji alliance cannot be counted on, even the elders who once stood with him in the vote. After the server-wide announcement just now, Suyukai knew that Gao Qiang would face a large number of enemies next. The worst-case scenario is that the human race and the elves will unite. After the meteor shower ends, they will first surround and kill Gao Qiang, and then have a decisive battle between the 2 sides. At this stage, the only people who may go with Suyukai to help Gao Qiang are the Ji family members arranged by Gao Qiang himself. No hurry, wait until the meteor shower is over. Compared with the little combat power that Suyukai can bring, Gao Qiang is more afraid that his big son will really die on the road. How dangerous is the 24-hour uninterrupted meteor shower? Only by experiencing it personally can you know. At the same time Suyukai sent the message, another meteorite fell inside the wall of size. This time is different from the one that hit the Stonehenge. Without a lot of ice to cool down, the heat wave directly ignited the surrounding green plants. If everyone present except Gao Qiang had not possessed extremely high resistance to fire, perhaps they would have been killed by the burning. We have to leave here quickly. Zhu frowned and said. As long as we are here for a moment, the stars in the sky may fall at any time. Gao Qiang nodded, even if the current war is likely to be the last decisive battle of this game. He didn't want these meteorites to destroy his territory. After telling Suyukai that he didn't need to come to support him for the time being, Gao Qiang first looked towards the hinterland of the human race. Just like Gongxing Jian knew where he was, because of the existence of Suyukai and Ji Lenjiao, Gao Qiang also knew the location of Gongxing Jian's territory. But Gao Qiang always had a strange feeling about Gongxing Jian. He wanted to be angry and a little bit laughed. Under the eyes of everyone in the fallen empire, destroying the ancient Stonehenge was simply the most impossible thing. But Gongxing Jian did it. With the power of the stars, Gongxing Jian was indeed very smart, smart enough to help Gao Qiang successfully awaken the fallen empire. In this regard, even Gao Qiang himself couldn't do it. So, let Gongxing Jian, who was closer to him, live a few more days and take everyone to visit the birthplace of the elves first? Or should we send Kosiikan to meet his grandmother? After all, after the awakening of the fallen empire, neither Kosiikan nor the so-called final strategy was needed. Gao Qiang didn't even hesitate for a few seconds. The information that followed made Gao Qiang determined. The elves declared war on the human race. Reason for war: total war. The elves' technology has reached the upper limit of 60% in this game, and you have unlocked the reason for declaring war on the elves: vigilance. At this moment, Jingye was standing on the top of the ancient war tree, silently overlooking everything in the distance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 59. Alliance with the human race? The idea of a mediocre person. Unlike other lords, Jingyi has never considered the option of uniting with the human race. Similarly, he doesn't care about the awakening empire that suddenly popped up. Looking at the ancient war tree under his feet, Jingyi's eyes are only calm. Victory belongs to the elves. The final strategy brought by the evil star buff is completely something that breaks through the upper limit of the world technology tree. The human race originally had the ability to fight against the elves, because they were the only two races in this war game that achieved the final strategy. But the human race is too stupid. That's right, facing the star power chosen by Gongxing Zhan, Jingyi can only spit out the word stupid. Don't look at the meteorite rain in the sky as shocking, but in fact it hurts others and yourself. What's more, at this moment, a meteorite hit the ancient war tree directly, smashing a hole through the trunk of the ancient war tree. But the next moment, the roots of the ancient war tree burst out with huge suction. As one after another of the vital trees in the forest died, the injuries on the ancient war tree seemed to have never appeared. Jingyi smiled. Besides, this so-called meteor shower has no effect on him. The only possibility for Gongxing Zhan to win is that the meteor shower kills enough human lords, and then wins the game by relying on the disadvantage of insufficient numbers of elves. But Jingyi will not watch him win like this. Thinking of this, Jingyi took out a scroll and used it directly. Letter of request for war, special item. Effect: after using the letter of request for war, this game will not enter the settlement stage unless your race wins or is completely destroyed. As cautious as he is, he naturally considered the possibility that Gongxing Zhan will massacre the lords of his own race. After using the letter of request for war, the war game will not be settled until the elves become the race with the most survivors in this game. Next, it is the time for the ancient tree of war to perform. On the way back, Juluo was a little uneasy. She saw fireballs falling from the sky one after another, smashing the undead lords who could not dodge into pieces. These were not enough to alert Juluo, because after just one day, the fireballs stopped falling. What really made Juluo feel wrong was the number of undead he had encountered so far. At this moment, he was close to the border of the undead and had not left the birth point of the undead, but Juluo had not seen any undead units. This sense of dead silence was quite unreasonable even in the territory of the undead. No, stop. Juluo suddenly stopped the action of the entire team. Her eyes were fixed on the oak tree in front of her, which did not show any abnormality. As long as we move forward another 30 steps as a whole, you will launch an attack on us. The oak tree opened its eyes and seemed to look at Juluo in confusion. What kind of human being would suspect that a tree was ambushing him? Back off. As soon as Juluo's voice was conveyed, the roots of the trees stretched out from the ground and pulled a Tyrannosaurus Rex that could not dodge into the ground. Loss of manpower. After retreating to the safe area in the rear, Juluo looked a little ugly. In front of her, oak trees opened their old faces. These old things were no smaller than the Tyrannosaurus Rex. At this time, some oak trees suddenly stretched their roots out of the soil. As the soil was turned over bit by bit, Julugo finally understood where the undead had gone. They tried to get into the ground to avoid the irresistible threat, but ended up becoming the nutrients of these weird trees. Seeing that the loss of a Tyrannosaurus rex and its knight was irreversible, Julugo did not hesitate at all and ordered people to retreat to the rear with him. Because the advance and retreat feature was activated. During the evacuation, the oak trees did not successfully stop everyone. An unexpected gain. In a hidden corner in the distance, Jingye looked at Julugo and his group, who left quickly in surprise. He did not know Julugo and the Tyrannosaurus rex knight. Because of caution, he did not collect any information about the Fallen Empire in this month, without knowing whether it would attract the attention of the Fallen Empire. But with the arrival of the War Ancient Tree, he felt that he could get to know it now. Jingye's mouth curled up in a strange arc. When the full-scale war with the human race started, he left the other elf lords alone and led the War Ancient Tree here alone. In order to trigger the splitting characteristics of the War Ancient Tree. As long as there is enough nutrition, why can't their elves have the ability to quickly send troops like the undead? Obviously, the bones of the undead are regarded as perfect nutrients by Jingye. Even the oak tree that Julugo just encountered came from the splitting of the War Ancient Tree. Oak Guard. Introduction, split from the War Ancient Tree, with 1/10 of the power of the War Ancient Tree. Do you think the Oak Guard is over? But I saw that the crowns of those old oak trees, one acorn after another, was thrown into the soil in the distance. After only half an hour of growth, the acorns grew into beings less than half a meter tall, but close to human form, and tracked in the direction Julugo left. Acorn Boy. Introduction, Oak Guardian Fruit, with 1% of Oak Guardian's power. This is Jingye's plan. At this moment, the ancient war tree moved between the territories of the elves and the undead. He only needs to slowly devour the undead, and he will get a large number of war units that are not afraid of death with the excellent nutrients of the undead. At the same time, the human race who chose the power of the stars has no way to compete with the ancient war tree. After he devoured the undead and the jackals, no matter whether it was the human race or the awakening empire, no existence would think of stopping his steps again. At the moment when Jingye thought so, a group of uninvited guests had already broken into the territory of the elves. Human. An elf lord saw the arrival of tens of thousands of humans on the ground, and couldn't help but show a vigilant look on his face. Everyone knows that the elves launched a full-scale war against the human race. Therefore, he would not think that the human race came to the birthplace of the elves to make friends with them. Moreover, the meteor shower of the human race caused them to lose many brothers and sisters. Thinking of this, many elf lords showed gloomy expressions. Because of the unique way of reproduction of the elves, most of the elf lords who entered the game in the same plane and in the same batch were relatives of each other. And the meteor shower of Gongxing. Let many elf lords who have never left the forest since the beginning of the game experience the pain of losing their relatives. Thinking about it, the gloomy expressions of some elf lords have turned into hatred. The fine bows in their hands were also silently aimed at the obsidian champion infantry knights who were about to enter the forest. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 60. Is this where the elves were born in their territory? Outside the forest, Gao Qiang stood on the plain, while Shasha led hundreds of champion infantry knights to stand in front of Gao Qiang. He had no intention of moving with a large force. After all, the combat units currently being trained all like to play with fire. Gao Qiang has not lived enough yet, so he dare not follow these oil cans into the forest. At the same time, those who did not head towards the forest were the field engineers recruited earlier. Gao Qiang just tried their ability to build anywhere. Later, under the action of thousands of field engineers, Gao Qiang finally witnessed a wave of tall buildings rising from the ground. A not-so-shabby outpost is being built at an incredible speed. The equipped sentry tower and bed crossbow were made on the spot. If it were not limited by the influence of the times, I am afraid these engineers could bring more surprises. Lord, your request has been completed. At this time, a field engineer came to Gao Qiang and said. At the same time, he tentatively asked, should we build more offensive equipment? Gao Qiang nodded. In fact, he has been looking at the building list since he came to the elves' territory. The so-called offensive equipment is so dazzling that people don't even know what to build. If it were other lords, they shouldn't have these worries, Gao Qiang couldn't help complaining in his heart. At this stage, it is hard to say whether other lords have selected equipment from the technology tree. For Gao Qiang, there are many attack devices that can be built. But most of them are aimed at city walls or buildings, such as ramming vehicles, giant trebuchets, and the like. Using these things to attack the elves running around in the woods is like using a cannon to fight mosquitoes. They are too cumbersome. Suddenly, Gao Qiang paused while scrolling through the interface. I didn't expect that there was such a thing in the attack equipment. Fire Dragon card. Introduction. A long-distance group attack unit with an attack range of 50 meters. When destroyed, it has a probability of triggering a violent explosion with a range of 50 meters and burning all objects within the range. Characteristics: slow, fragile, large self-destruction. What kind of self-destructing car? That's it? Just when Gao Qiang confirmed the construction of the Fire Dragon chariot, a team of tens of thousands of infantry knights and can throwers finally entered the outskirts of the forest with heavy steps. From this moment on, they successfully stepped into the attack range of the elves. Whoosh! The sound of breaking wind sounded. Without any warning, the elves finally took the lead and shot the first arrow. They will never watch human beings enter their own sphere of existence. Unsurprisingly, the moment the arrow collided with the obsidian, it broke into two sections. But the sound of collision and the crisp sound of the bowstring had successfully exposed his position. Behind the heavy armor of the infantry knight, a can thrower in thin clothing lifted his cloak, revealing a full of fire oil cans under the cloak. Thousands of fire oil cans hit the spot where the bow and arrow had just been shot. The number of fire oil cans was even greater than the arrows that had just flown over. What is that? The elven archer's eyes widened as he looked at the overwhelming number of clay pots. These people obviously don't know this kind of thing. Only the elf lords who participated in the war game suddenly changed their expressions when they saw this thing. Looking at the overwhelming cans of fire being thrown around, they suspected a not-so-good possibility. With the crisp sound of pieces of ceramic shattering, countless kerosene directly covered the place where the arrow had just been shot. Raging fire soared into the sky. Ah! An extremely strange wailing sound rose in the fire. The first person to be hit hard was not the elven archer who was shooting arrows. As early as the moment when the fire oil can was thrown, they had already changed their positions. And where they were originally standing, those seemingly normal trees were erupting in the flames with bursts of miserable wailing sounds. What the hell? The elf lord's eyes widened. Tree people? Are there treants in this war game? They did not immediately think of the power of the forest that Jingyi had activated. Because Jingyi never told any lord about the specific content of the evil star buff. The week of evil stars is more like a week without incident for most elven lords. Now that he saw tree people in his own territory, the elf lord looked like he had seen a ghost. It's just that they have to put aside the issue of tree people first. We can't let those humans burn anymore. Looking at the can of fire oil that was thrown out as if it was free of money, the elf lord looked gloomy. Their speed allowed them to escape the fire, but what about this forest? Without the protection of the forest, the elves' advantage in guerrilla warfare would be lost. Their eyes looked at the kin throwers mixed in among the foot warriors. If you want to keep the forest, you can't keep those kin throwers. Let me try it. An elf lord suddenly stood up straight and took out two polished stone swords from behind. Almost all the soldiers he brought were dressed like him. Lord Yejing. On the surrounding giant trees, other lords looked at the lord who had just spoken with strange eyes. They thought of some rumors about Yejing. Compared with other elf lords, Yejing didn't seem to love bows and arrows that much. Even when facing the first week of the natural disaster, he chose to use melee skills to fight against the wolves. It is said that on the last night of the natural disaster week, Yejing fought 3 giant wolves alone without relying on his subjects. In the end, the 3 giant wolves were tortured to death, but Yejing was just a little exhausted and didn't have many more wounds on his body. He may not be the elf lord who killed the giant wolf the fastest, but he is definitely the one with the most cruel means in the hearts of the lords. Therefore, Yejing has never been accepted by other lords. But not being accepted does not mean that he is not strong. Many lords secretly glanced at the warriors brought by Yejing. Sword Dancer. Introduction: good at fighting with 2 swords, agile, can pass through thousands of troops without blood. Features: climbing proficiency, haste, dual wielding of light weapons. The strange building for training sword dancers was the reward that Yejing got after killing the giant wolf. Many lords looked at each other. Even if they disliked Yejing and felt that Yejing was a bit of a spoiler of the elegance of the elves, they couldn't show it at this moment. In terms of melee ability, Yejing and the sword dancer in his hand should be the most powerful unit in the current era. Okay, Lord Yejing, just go ahead, we will provide you with long-range support, an elf lord suggested. From beginning to end, no one proposed to attack the Obsidian Champion Infantry Knights with Yejing.